celebrity here in Indianapolis, and it's my pleasure to interview Gary Gulman, who is a comedian who will be in town this weekend for VonnegutFest, and he will be the headline act Saturday evening at the Timequake Clam Bake. Gary, how are you this evening?
I'm terrific, thank you.
Good. Gary, let's get a little background as far as you becoming a comedian. I know everybody thinks it's so easy. Everybody thinks they're funny. I think I'm hysterical. Actually, my challenge tonight is to make you laugh once, my daughter said. Then that will confirm that I'm actually funny if I get a comedian to laugh. When did you know you were funny?
Probably, I don't know that I ever knew I was funny. I just knew that I liked it when people laughed at the things I said or did. So I had a addiction to that kind of feedback that I was never able to kick. So I guess I must be funny just based on the empirical evidence. But as a child, that's when I realized it was sort of currency in my family and with other people, usually older people. I could get attention from them, and although it disrupted my schoolwork, but it seemed to be a fair trade-off.
So when you say disrupted your schoolwork, did you mean just getting your work done, or were you, for lack of a better word, the class clown? Did you make people laugh in school? There's nothing wrong with being the class clown, is there?
No, there isn't, but I always picture the class clown as somebody who's admired by the other kids, and I think I irritated them, and really they thought I was pretty weird. So I would say that I was not a class clown as much as a class disruptor and irritant, and a person who liked to get a witty line in wherever possible.
Now, humor, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it goes beyond just being funny. Obviously, there's timing involved. I think to be funny, a lot of times you have to be very, very intelligent to be funny as well. So it's not just a matter of being funny, is it? Or maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. The best explanation I ever heard was Dave Chappelle saying that it was like that comedy was sort of a language that he spoke. And I feel that to a certain extent, that I can usually in just about any situation make something funny about it, or say something funny, or just get a laugh or lighten a moment, and that's based on years and years of experimentation and learning this language and the techniques, and the certain words are funny, certain expressions, certain whispering can be funny, and yelling can be funny, everything in between, and references can be funny, or they can be off base, or so there are just countless techniques and assets in comedy. There are a lot of colors in the palette.
Okay, you mentioned Dave Chappelle, which means I have to ask you, who do you find funny? Who makes Gary Gulman laugh?
Well, I love Brian Regan.
Okay. He's
one of my favorites, and but my all-time favorite performer, actor, comedian is Chris Elliott, who's the son of Bob Elliott from Bob and Ray.
Oh, he was in one of my favorite shows years ago. Was it Get a Life, where you had a paper route, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes. Get a Life is my favorite television program of all time. I know just about every episode, word for word. Unfortunately, or fortunately, there were only about 40 episodes, if that. So it was easy to memorize them. But I just adored him. I think that the loser with confidence and even arrogance is the most appealing character to me.
Okay, Get a Life, underappreciated, I think.
Yes.
Certainly underappreciated. Who else? You're out of luck. Chris Elliott, Brian Regan. Is there anybody else that comes to mind?
When I first started doing comedy, there was a special on late at night of Paul Reiser, who at the time was on Mad About You TV series, and that was very influential on me because he was the first guy I really saw who went on stage and just talked. It was so conversational, and he didn't have any gimmicks or voices or he didn't really raise his voice. He didn't run around or do a lot of physical stuff. It just seemed that he was being himself, and he was talking about things that were interesting to him and to me. And so I think I know that I after I saw that. Prior to that, I had a certain act, which was just very eclectic and anything for a laugh. And then I got into more of a conversational and initially very, very observational and very personal or biographical type act. So that was a great influence on me, just that style and the content of his act.
Yeah, I mean, there's all, and again, I'll just go with a follow-up question off of what you said. There's all kinds of comedy. I mean, there's Carrot Top, right?
Yes, there certainly is.
So there's like all kinds of approaches to making people laugh, correct?
Yeah. I think the only tenet I really cling to over the years is trying to be original, which is, strictly speaking, impossible because it's such a long history of comedy. But that's really what I strive for, is to try to be original and if possible unique. So of course that's an aspiration, and how could you ever be original when there's nothing new under the sun, which they decided that like 5,000 years ago. So it can only be worse.
Speak with Gary Gulman, who a comedian. Of course, he'll be in town this weekend for the Time Quake Clam Bake. He'll be the headlining act. VonnegutFest, things going on all week, and especially this weekend. So you go through school. I know that you played college football at Boston College, and all along, as you're going through school, as you're doing this, were you thinking, I want to be a comedian? Is that what your aspiration was?
Absolutely. I think that at least subconsciously, from the time I was 6 or 7, I really wanted to make strangers laugh. I really wanted to be a comedian. I mean, of all the professions you could be, and of all the types of jobs you could have, I admired comedians the most. I really looked up to them and was in awe.
Now, just to stick with that, being on the football team at Boston College, you still watch football? You watch college football? Watch the NFL at all?
Yes. I watch every Saturday and Sunday, and I watch all the shows leading up to it. And I'm a huge fan. Unfortunately, I take the wins and losses of my New England Patriots or any sports team that I follow, I take them so hard and become depressed, and for whatever reason I've put a justice component into the results of the football game. So if my team loses, then it's a defeat for justice and decency and humanity, and that's really crazy. But I can't shake it.
You bring that up, and it's funny. Here, being in Indianapolis, we're not fans, okay, of the New England Patriots at all. And a buddy of mine said after this past weekend, where they just did a number on the Steelers, he says it's like rooting against God. You're not going to. Why bother rooting against the New England Patriots? It's futile. It's absolutely futile. And as I said to you earlier, it's such a shame, and don't take this personally, that's such a beautiful part of the country. The New England area is gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's populated by Red Sox and Patriot fans. I mean, that's the worst possible population. But it's a beautiful part of the country. And again, give credit where it's due. I say this as someone who follows the NFL very closely, Gary. As long as the Patriots have Belichick and Brady, they're going to hang around. and they're going to be there, and come playoff time, they're going to be dangerous because that's just what they do.
Yeah, well, if it's any consolation, John, I want you to know that the people of New England, if the sports radio is any indication, are really disappointed with the Patriots year in, year out, week in, week out. They buried Brady about 4 or 5 years ago. There are guys who still say that they haven't been good since the 18-1 season. So they're really miserable and really can't enjoy this. Maybe someday, in looking back on it, but I saw a sign at the Red Sox parade the other day. It said, I'm 11 years old and I've been to 8 parades. So 3 Red Sox, 3 Patriots, and a Celtics and a Bruins, and yet this town couldn't be more pessimistic and negative about their sports teams.
Which is unbelievable because the Red Sox have such a long drought, and now, 3 World Series championships, in the last 6 or 7 years or so, and they finally get one at home. I have to say, if nothing else, it should give hope for Chicago Cubs fans. I'd like to say that, but I can't. I can't. I can't do that. Let me ask you this. Okay, so you start doing stand-up. Now, did you start out like a lot of people do? Again, as I told you earlier, I went to an open mic night. My buddy was there on stage. All along, I'm thinking, this has got to be a piece of cake. I'm funny. I could get up on that stage and do a half an hour and have people laugh. And, watching some of those poor folks up there where nobody was laughing, I'm thinking 5 minutes has to seem like an hour and a half because these people are dying. So how did you start doing open mic, or how did you get into the whole deal?
Yeah, I did open mics. I still do them occasionally. I'll pop in, and they can make you feel like a first-time comedian. I mean, I've been on stage probably 400 times a year for the past 15 years, and I can be reduced to a complete novice by the wrong crowd at an open mic show. So it's very difficult, and the audiences aren't always receptive. Sometimes they're just there to see their friends. But I just remember that and this is absolutely necessary to continue in this business, is a blind confidence, a confidence based on nothing except for some sort of inner drive, which makes you think you're funny, when I don't know many people who are good for the first 20 or 30 appearances. You may get laughs, but to any professional or veteran of comedy, you would say that this person is incredibly amateurish and probably talentless.
Okay, which leads me to something else. And now, again, I consider myself funny. A lot of people think they're funny, Gary.
Yes.
Have you ever been tempted to say to somebody, you know what, you're not funny, stop embarrassing yourself and just be not funny? Or have you ever taken that upon yourself? Because I've come close a few times, but I can't do it.
Yeah, I could never do that. It's so
no.
It's so cruel. But
you're doing them a favor. You're actually doing somebody a favor.
Yeah, but I just imagine it would be very difficult to come back, and that person would really despise you, and it just it seems like going for the jugular. And isn't it subjective? Maybe to somebody else, this person is hilarious. I mean, I could tell a number of very successful professional comedians that I don't think they're funny, and then there are a million people who want to buy anything that they appear on. So it's who am I?
Well, again, I deal with people like on a day-to-day basis that are not comedians, but nobody else thinks they're funny except them. I've never done it, though. I can't do that. So, okay, so you're up there. You're having a night where nobody's laughing, but you said you have this blind confidence, so you just have it in the back of your head, I'm funny regardless of what these people think. Is that the thought process?
No. No, not right away. I think luckily my first few experiences I got laughs and some applause and some feedback. Now looking back on it, the material was incredibly weak, and I had no business getting any laughs. But for whatever reason, whether it was charisma or the nervousness of a first performance, whatever it was, I caught the bug. But even now, when I'm not getting any laughs, I'm thinking this is horrible. What was I thinking? Thinking that this was ever funny, and it's incredible how I can do a show on the east side of town, go over to the west side, a half hour later, a different audience, and they are not impressed at all, and it's just I guess it makes it a challenge, but at the same time it can be very frustrating and irritating.
Okay, so you think the material or what you're doing isn't funny or the audience isn't receptive. Did you ever have it in your head where I'm in the wrong business, I got to get my real estate license?
Yes.
Yeah, laugh. See, there you go.
Yes, absolutely. Never real estate, but I often thought I would go back and get a teaching degree so I could do something that had a moral or ethical manifestation. I started off in accounting and I couldn't rationalize it. It just didn't make any sense that I was contributing anything.
So with that contributing, and I think that there's a number of people in this world who would like to get some sense of accomplishment. And I would imagine if you give folks their money's worth, if you make them laugh, if you allow them to have a great evening, they go home feeling good about life, about themselves, about what they saw, that has to give you some sense of accomplishment, right, with what you've done that evening?
Yes. I mean, I don't always feel that way at the end of every night. It would be obnoxious to break it down into those terms, but every once in a while I'll get an email or I'll do some reflecting and I'll think, at the very least, I lightened somebody's load tonight and made them forget about their immediate problems for a while. You know, it reminds me of a quote that a lot of people attribute to Kurt Vonnegut, but I think was actually from his son Mark about that our job, I'm paraphrasing and I'll probably butcher it, but our job on earth is to help other people get through this thing, whatever it might be. Is that close?
Yeah, that's close. That's
right.
Close. We have a Vonnegut audience out there, so I'm sure they're like, what? No, but it is. How long was it before you got comfortable? Where you got up there and said, you know what, I can do this, I'm very confident, and I'm just going to get up there and do what I do because this is what I do best. Did it take a while, I would imagine, to get comfortable based on what I've seen?
Yes, and you know what, that is all right, there's a fire truck going by.
Oh, you're in New York City, that happens all the time.
Yeah. But that's a great question that nobody ever asked me. I just remember coming off stage for years, at least the first 4 years, and thinking, I wish there was some way I could be myself on stage and be as comfortable and fun on stage as I'm off. I would just get very anxious and nervous and just self-conscious and in my head on stage, and so I would say it took at least 3, maybe even 4 or 5 years to get to the point where I felt like I was bringing my personality onto the stage. Not just my jokes, but my personality mixed in there. And I think anybody will tell you that's the really important thing, that you can be yourself on stage. Otherwise, I don't think it's ineffective. I think it's ineffective, and I also think that it must be just a grueling job to be uncomfortable every night when you go on, and I just I don't know whether it was a long time that it took or a short time comparatively, but for me I think it was definitely 4 years, and then within I think 6 years I was able to make a meager living at it.
Yeah, because I've been told it takes, again, based on what I've seen, it takes a good 2 years for folks to really kind of feel like, I'm pretty good at this. I'm pretty comfortable at this. I feel as though I'm coming across pretty well. A good 2 years at least to get to that point.
Yeah, definitely.
Gary Gulman, comedian, joining us on our Google Hangout. He'll be in town this Saturday. Timequake Clambake will be the headlining act this Saturday evening. Indianapolis, have you been here before to our fair city?
Yes, I've been there, I think, 3 or 4 times, probably 5 times. I've played at a theater. I want to say the Paramount, but that's I'm guessing. It was a theater that had a nice name like that, but maybe not the Paramount. And then I play a comedy club called Morty's Comedy Joint, and I really like that. I really like the audiences in Indiana, and I like going on the Bob and Tom show there, and which is very popular. So I really enjoy Indianapolis, and it's funny. A lot of the people that I admire are from Indianapolis. You know, Kurt Vonnegut, maybe not Indianapolis, but Indiana. Kurt Vonnegut and John Wooden and Larry Bird, and I know there are other people I'm leaving out, but I just it seems like a very sharp town.
You go all over the country. Different audiences, I'm sure. Do different things appeal to different audiences and the different corners of this country? Absolutely.
I know that that the farther you get from a major city, the less likely the people are to enjoy irony or sarcasm. I mean, it's a cliche and it's stereotypical, but I don't know any comedian who will tell you that the rural or the suburban gigs are as good as the ones that are in major cities. And I'm not saying that the entire middle of the country is barren of good audiences, but I really believe the farther you get from the capital city or from a college town, the less likely most of your comedians are to enjoy the audience.
So if you do those shows, do you change your approach? Do you change your jokes? Do you change what you talk about to cater to that sort of audience?
I wouldn't say I cater, but those crowds are for editing and making it a little shorter, and I mean my act, at least currently, is based on very drawn out digressions, almost in a Rube Goldberg type of contraption, where the joke doesn't really start off where it ends, and there are all kinds of asides and digressions, and I really abridge that if I go to a city that either isn't familiar with me or is not very cosmopolitan. I mean, it sounds very snobbish, but it's just it's their sensibility is different from mine.
Yeah, and
yeah.
You know, traveling around this country, people are different. Their emotions are different. I find you're an East Coast guy. I'm from northern New Jersey, and I know in the New Jersey tri-state area, New York, Connecticut, Jersey, people wear their emotions on their sleeve, and we can't talk without using our hands, things of that. So again, when you get to Indianapolis, and this is, I'm not judging, I'm not saying good or bad. There's not as much emotion here, but laughter is laughter, and if people are going to laugh, correct?
Yeah, I just think there might be in New York and New Jersey and Boston and areas like that. People are more comfortable with sort of the confessional nature of modern stand-up comedy, where you're revealing things that people are either embarrassed to reveal in their regular life, or are considered rude or impolite to share. So that can be difficult, and also I think that sometimes people just don't want to hear certain things coming out of certain aged people. I think that if it's an older crowd, they really don't want to hear a younger guy be very personal in I guess a sexual or even a psychological nature. They don't really want to hear that you're depressed or that you are having sex at all.
All right, Gary, you're coming into town, coming to Indianapolis, of course, for VonnegutFest, the Time Quake Clam Bake, and your attraction to Kurt Vonnegut. You mentioned him as someone in Indianapolis who, of course, who you liked. What brought you to this whole tie-in with Kurt Vonnegut?
I first read, I bet you more than 80% of the people who ever read Kurt Vonnegut, their first book was Slaughterhouse-Five, and so I read that when I was in 9th or 10th grade, and the first time I read it, I was just blown away by it. It was probably the first adult book. I mean, it's very adult. I mean, he talks about sex, and he talks about what was clearly some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder, and so it was not light, and it was just it was so unique and like nothing else that I had read, and almost that I was a very innocent and sheltered kid, and I think it was one of those books that I probably would have kept in my room so that my mom wouldn't come across it and see any of the exchanges on Tralfamadore. And so I think it was probably another few years before I read another Vonnegut book, but since then I've read everything at least twice, and the biographies and interviews, and I just the interesting thing is that I before I even read him, I'm pretty sure that I saw him in a cameo in Rodney Dangerfield's Back to School.
Yeah.
And I guess just the fact that he had the Rodney Dangerfield approval, I knew that he must be a cool guy. And so I think that may have led me to read Slaughterhouse-Five, although I can't be sure. But that movie turns out to combine two of my favorite people. So that was interesting. I need to plug in my computer so that I don't. So I'll just walk with you, but I'm gonna plug.
Yeah, that's
I'm gonna plug in.
that's not a problem.
Let me see if I can give you a shot of the.
All right.
This. Can you see that?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
That's a Vonnegut drawing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a self-portrait that I bought years ago. And all right.
You good?
Yeah, I'm just gonna plug in here, and all right. Now you're in the inner sanctum, the bedroom of Gary Gulman, where the magic, no magic happens, or at least doesn't happen frequently.
All right, Gary. Kurt Vonnegut was a lot of things, and to me, he had a tremendous sense of humor, and I would imagine you reading his books picked up on that. There were a lot of very, very funny observations made by that man in his writings.
Yes. Yes. But I'll tell you, it was never it was never the first thing that I looked to when I opened up a Kurt Vonnegut book. I mean, it was always very funny and very brave humor, very honest humor, and in some cases it was very adult and could be very mature. But what really drew me to him was the way he treated what many people would consider the misfits, or the I hate to use this term because they're not losers, but the people who are the cogs in the wheel, the people who are not at the top of the food chain, and he just always had a respect for them, and a reverence for the everyman, and I just that's what drew him to me, and just his because I always felt that I was soft and not. I guess what I'm saying is that the capitalist system is terrific for somebody who's very ambitious and driven and together upstairs as far as emotionally. But I grew up with a lot of troubles with my mood and depression and loneliness, and I just as Vonnegut says a lot of times about literature, the author is implicitly saying you're not alone, and I think just even the fact that he mentions the idea of loneliness and how lonely people can be, especially in the modern era, it made me feel better. And it sounds funny, but I actually say this on stage. You're never alone in feeling alone. There are other people who are alone at the same time, and so it's a condition, and it is universal. So I mean that's also something that I liked in Emerson in Self-Reliance, where he talked about the personal being universal, that really you don't have to feel ashamed of just about any thought or emotion or feeling or attitude, because where there are so many people, you're definitely not alone.
I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate you being your honesty as far as talking about that. And I think to a degree, what plays into that are a couple of things, Gary. There were times when I read his work and said, he knows exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
He's talking to me because I'm that person. And also with the characters in his books, whether it was Kilgore Trout or Elliot Rosewater, no matter who they are or what people thought of them, they had lives. They had intriguing, interesting lives, and he brought those people to life and told their stories.
Yeah, you mentioned Elliot Rosewater, and that's a very underread book. God bless him, Mr. Rosewater. It's just it's so beautiful, and it just really moved me. I just remember being so thrilled by that one, and my favorite is Sirens of Titan, and it's just I mean, I think it's just a masterpiece that hardly anybody I know has read. Of all the books I've bought for people, and that's my favorite gift to give somebody, I've bought Sirens of Titan probably dozens of times for people, and I hope they read it, because it's just I think it really changed me, because there's a particular line, and I can't remember the name of the character, but he was Malachi Constant's financial advisor, and they said that he was the second wealthiest man on the planet because he knew one thing, that when you ask somebody how they're doing, they say great, never better. But he knew that in reality that the answer was that they were lying, that the truth was they were absolutely miserable and things couldn't be worse. And they said that gave him the advantage in every business transaction he was involved in. And it must have struck me at a time in my teens when I thought, why am I so miserable? I'm the only person who's sad and lonely. And then this book says, no, everybody's miserable, and we're all in this together. Now, it's an exaggeration. Of course, not everybody's miserable all the time, but it made me feel a lot less guilty and ashamed of my moods to hear that. Again, I mean, it's the overarching theme is that I'm not alone.
Again, I think that's a prevailing theme in Vonnegut's books, a lot of his work, where you're not, where there are people who feel like his characters, there are people who feel like him.
Yeah.
You know, and he had a very different way of looking at life, but not so different where there aren't a lot of us, a lot of people who look at life in a lot of ways the same way that he did. And you know, I just think that's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are a lot of there's a lot of credit and praise for people who say that, you know, the cliche comedian, he says the things that we're all thinking, but it's one thing to say the things we're all thinking about minor things or petty things. Kurt Vonnegut was talking about the things we're thinking about life and death, and about loneliness, about sadness, about the nature of our relationships with technology, and our relationships with each other, with our family, with our communities, and just I don't feel like he wrote the same book over and over again. But those themes are prevalent in all of them, and I could never get enough of it. Every book that he came out with, I devoured as soon as it came out, and have read and reread. I just I've never had a relationship like that with any author. I mean, I love Philip Roth, and I've read everything he's written, but I don't see myself in Philip Roth the way I did in Kurt Vonnegut's books.
Gary Gulman, comedian, joining us. Will be here in Indianapolis Saturday evening during VonnegutFest. That Saturday evening, he will be the headliner at Timequake Clambake. Just a couple more quick questions, Gary, to finish up, if we're okay.
Yeah, of course.
Do you incorporate anything of his works into your act? I certainly know, based on what you said, you incorporate them into your day-to-day life and how you approach things, I would think. How about your act or your observations? Do you incorporate anything that you've learned from him in that?
I mean, I'm certain that there are certain. It's incredible because I'm not one of these people who memorizes quotes and Shakespeare and speeches, but for whatever reason, the way he wrote them, and I guess I keep going back to them so that people think I'm smarter than I really am because I remember these quotes. But there's one in particular that I came across again today, was be careful who you pretend to be, because in the end you are who you pretend to be. And again, it's probably a paraphrase and I ruined it, but that's basically the thing, is that there are opportunities as a comedian to sort of portray a character and act in a certain manner that may be an offshoot of your real personality, but isn't your real personality. And I mean, I look at some of the people who've been very successful, being really mean, I guess, for lack of a more specific term, and I just think if you can live with that, that's fine. I admire that, but for me, I can't have regrets about the way I've talked about things or been. I never want to go after the least among us, or it's very popular in comedy to insult the poor, or the homeless, or the minorities, and I just think it's too easy. So even if it was a very lucrative character who did that, it would be similar to just being who you are pretending to be. So I guess that's an overarching theme, and then just the honesty with which Kurt Vonnegut wrote about his mood and his emotions and his attitudes. I mean, that's something I had to develop because early on in my career, I was very most of the jokes were observations about things outside of me, and definitely not about my mood or my opinions or philosophy. So that's something I grew into, but I think it's something that was made easier because of my exposure to Vonnegut's books.
Yeah, and along those lines, one of the prevailing themes in his works is be nice to each other.
Yes.
So that leads me back full circle to where I asked you if you would tell people who weren't funny if they would be funny. That wouldn't be nice. So
No.
you would lay off of that, whereas I'm tempted.
Yeah.
I'm tempted. Okay, let's wrap this up, Gary. What can folks expect Saturday evening at your show?
Well, I would say that I'm at the top of my game.
Okay.
And that I feel very confident in my my skills are very sharp these days, and I've been doing it for a long time, and there aren't many people who are as dedicated to improving and being good at this as I am. So I think they will see something unique and something that is in the sensibility and emotional range of somebody who enjoys Kurt Vonnegut.
Well, I know folks here in Indianapolis, the Vonnegut fans, and this library and what we do here has become so popular in the city and actually across the world, folks. I know folks are really looking forward to you getting here to Indianapolis to be part of VonnegutFest. I'm really neat that was set up. So I want to wish you a safe trip. I want to tell you how much I enjoyed this interview, and
me too.
Is there anything you want to ask me?
Well, how did you come to be involved in the Vonnegut Library?
Actually, I had read somewhere online or in the paper that this group was together to put this library together in honor of Kurt Vonnegut. I have been reading his works for years. Sirens of Titan was actually the first book I ever read by him.
Oh, really? What is that? Do you enjoy that book?
Loved it, and how I came across that book and how I discovered Kurt Vonnegut was Al Stewart, who is an English folk singer, and we know him for Year of the Cat, some of his later work. Back then, he had a song called Sirens of Titan, and there was a little asterisk on the back of the album based on the book by Kurt Vonnegut, and that song made me go to the library and get Sirens of Titan, which I read, loved, and then continued to read all his other works. But that was it, based on an Al Stewart song. But anyway, I saw that they were putting this, they had a thought of putting a memorial library together here in Indianapolis, so I started attending the meetings and got to know Julia very well, Kip, some of the other folks involved, and I went through the process of putting this library together, and it's just so neat to see it actually be. It's so cool that we're in the building right now, and to see this building based on where we were, a few years ago, where it was just a thought and there was work, it's been a great thing. I've been so pleased to be a small part, and it's a different kind of crowd, the folks, from what I'm used to. I'm more of a jock kind of guy, and the people that I've met that are on this board that are associated with this library are different from a lot of the folks I've associated with through the years, Gary, and it's just been such a great thing because it's really, truly enlightened me and opened up a whole new world to someone such as myself.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. Yeah, I'm honored to be a part of this, and I can't wait to get there.
Well, listen, have a safe trip.
I will.
And if the Patriots have to come here to Indianapolis and Brady's got to face Andrew Luck, you can come back and check that out as well in January. What do you think?
I'm in.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Gary. Have a safe trip.
Okay, thanks, John. Have a nice day.
All righty.